All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. It is 6:46 and May 10th, and welcome everybody to the board meeting of Cedar Springs Public Schools, and welcome to everybody that's joining us in from Zoom world. So we can not worry about how many are in the room, and anybody can participate that chooses to do so. Or if they're just listening from their kitchen counter, or they might be sitting in their car at soccer practice. So we're happy to have everyone join us. So welcome, Missy. All right, so we will move to our next item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And if Scott has the flag ready.
We are ready to go.
Okay, we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so we'll move on to a roll call. Tracy, Secretary Slager, if you could help us with that, please.
Yes, Trustee Bowser.
Here.
Trustee Rivard.
Here.
Trustee Vanderhyde.
Here.
Treasurer Gilmore.
Here.
Secretary Slager, here. Vice President Schaffner.
Here.
And President Reed.
Here. Thank you, and we've established a full quorum. So we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda, and I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Or support.
Any discussion? Having none, Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, the agenda is adopted as presented. And that brings us to gratitudes. Would anyone like to share gratitude? I'll open it up to the floor, to the board and administration.
I was grateful for the outpouring of support for really all members of the Cedar Springs staff. Last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and a week ago Saturday was Principal Appreciation Day, but we rolled it into one big celebration and just appreciated all educators on campus and at home. And it was just a remarkable expression of support at the building level, at the classroom level, and at the district level. So it was a fun adventure to be a part of. We actually, when we arrived at the district office on Friday morning, we had been visited by balloon fairies who filled the lobby and the main hall down to the bulk of the offices with balloons. And so that's been an interesting space to navigate over the last few days, but just great color and great expressions of just appreciation for one another. It's a great example of, people lifting each other up and being there to support one another. And that just makes it for a great team.
That is good news with all the extra work and commitment and everything that everybody has put forth in all of this. So, okay. All right. We'll move on to then our high school representatives. We have with us Cecilia Smith and Julia Smith to give us their update of their student senate activities in the high school. So you can, there you go.
So around this time, we are starting to do student council applications for next year. So far we've got, I think, about 10, and we're starting to hold interviews. So it's not as many as we were hoping. So we're going to try to reach out to more students to get them to apply and see, hopefully we can get some more for next year.
Yes. Another thing, so I believe
previously we had talked about spring fling, the like other prom that the juniors were gonna host. There was not enough student participation for that, so unfortunately we had to cancel it. But I don't know. We're just trying to keep school spirit high. We only have a little bit of time left, so that's our goal for right now. And then the senior class council is also working on graduation. We're waiting for further instruction from Mr. Barenwald as to what exactly we can do, but we do have Mr. Painter as our commencement speaker, and then we're just kind of moving forward with what we can on the little details as of right now.
Okay. So for your applicants, is it two representatives a class, or has that changed since the old days, my old days?
Well, so we try to have 4 on each council if we can. But last year there was a lot of like 3 to 4. So really, like, it depends, but we're hoping right now we have about, like, some we have 3 and then some we have 2, and then one class I don't think we have any for the incoming freshmen. So we're really just trying to, like, especially because a lot of the 8th graders don't really know that much. We went and talked to them, but like I think it's a lot of like they're not sure what to get into exactly. So we might just have to recruit at the beginning of the school year like we did this past year.
Okay. When they get there a little more comfortable, when they're there, they know that you're not going to bite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good, good. Any other questions for the high school representatives? Okay, thank you. Thank you for updating us, and thank you for keeping spirits high and all that you're doing. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. All right. Moving on to our consent items, as I would entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed. Yes, the consent items are approved as presented. That brings us to the area of our meeting for discussion. And our item A is the financial update with Chris LaHaye.
Thank you, President Reed. All right, I will be brief tonight. I did change my format just a little bit, but as you know, we're one month away from our big budget hearing, which will take place on June 7th. So that's coming quickly. In board book, we have our year-to-date general fund budget update. You'll see that our revenues and our expenses for the year we're hitting that point where they're almost even as we continue to get those state aid payments in. The bond fund update is included. Not much has changed once again since last month because we're just getting underway with construction. We'll speak about that later. And then we have our other parts, the AP, the cash receipts, and the purchase card details if you have any questions. In tonight's update, I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview about what's going on in Lansing and set the stage for next month's budget meeting, because this is all stuff that I'm really paying close attention to as we move into these last few weeks where I have to get everything finalized. So we have seen a budget proposal from all three, the governor, the Senate, and the House. And so those have come through and they're quite a bit different. I'm just going to speak briefly about those now. The thing that will really push them forward is the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, which will take place on Friday, May 21st. So that will shed some light and hopefully provide some clarity before we get into our budget. So moving forward. So next year, one thing you remember this year we spoke quite a bit about was the super blend of enrollment because of COVID-19. Where 75% of our enrollment was from last school year, and then 25 was from this school year. Looks like we're heading back to a traditional blend, the 90-10 funding, where 90% will be next fall and 10% will be this past spring. So no more blend or super blend. As really helped us out and helped a lot of districts out this year. Enrollment stabilization, I've mentioned this, the governor's budget did provide a 70% safety net for districts experiencing a enrollment decline, again, from last year to next year. The Senate and the House came out and did not support that. So I'm not optimistic we're going to see that. Hopefully we won't have to worry about it as we get our students back in our buildings next year. Foundation allowance, this is really the biggest thing other than enrollment that paints our revenue side picture. The executive governor's budget showed a $164 per student increase for us. The Senate came out with a $250 per pupil increase. And then the House had a $100 per pupil increase, but then also a $120 per pupil one-time payment. At this point, I'm still awaiting more details because those are all quite a bit apart before I finalize and get a number that I use for my budget, which I'll fill you in on in a month. Something that's also worth noting, special education. This has been a push for the last several years. We did not see it this year, but a 2% increase in reimbursement or revenue for special ed costs. All three supported that. The House supported an extra $20 million flow through Ken ISD through what's known as Act 18 revenue. That would really benefit the district as well. So good news there. Looks like we will receive more revenue through the special education reimbursement, no matter what the final budget looks like. This is something I threw in because it's really, really important to us. The pandemic seat time flexibility. Obviously this year, we moved away from that seat time requirement where we need to have 75% of students in the district on any given day in order for it to count. And in lieu of that, we've had to do this extended COVID learning plan, which Jen and I will once again put before you this evening to show that we're meeting attendance in any given month. As you can see across the board here through the governors, the senates, and the houses, there's really pretty much a consensus that we're going to go back to traditional requirements, 180 days, 1,098 hours, and 75% daily attendance. There is still some confusion about whether or not we'll have to do the extended COVID learning plans at board meetings. More to come on that, but worth noting that if districts are going to run an alternative program, a flexible seat time program next year, they'll have to apply for a waiver as in years past, which this year, obviously, everybody was granted flexibility on that. So that's it for those three budgets. I wanted to just fill you all in on one other thing, which is our summer school and credit recovery. I mentioned this a few months ago, or maybe it was last month, but how this is going to work. But there was a big push through bills that came through the House and were signed into law by the governor for summer school for this year and funding that goes along with it. So I just wanted you're going to see this. This is all going to be an add on this year's budget. It wasn't in the amendment. The good thing is it's both on the revenue side and on the expense side, excuse me. So summer school is defined as K-8 and credit recovery is defined as grades 9 through 12. And it's going to operate here in Cedar Springs June 14th through August 13th. So we'll have 8 weeks of summer school. Here's the revenue side of this. The district's going to receive $550 per pupil for those that are enrolled. Okay, so this money's going to be coming in actually on May 20th. And then by June 15th, we have to report how many students are actually enrolled in our program. And then we have to send back any extra dollars. So that's going to be interesting around budget time. But then also we're going to receive revenues of $1,000 per teacher and $250 per support staff that have signed up to work at least 2 weeks in summer school. So we'll receive that funding May 20th as well. And we have to get that money actually out to our staff before most of them teach any summer school. But again, it's all signed into law. So we have to do that. And then, so that'll all be this fiscal year. Expenditures, what I've estimated, you can see there, and it includes all of the salaries and benefits, supplies, GRASP teaching booklets. Those are booklets that maybe Jen can speak a little bit more on if anybody has any questions. But basically, that's a learning program that students can continue their learning without actually coming into the district. You can see that my expenditures are estimated just a little bit light of the revenues. And we'll see how that plays out. If there are any excess revenues, it's all money that we can defer and use towards summer school in future years. So we will end up having to recognize this in both this fiscal year before June 30 and next fiscal year after June 30. So I went through that quickly, but that is my update. I'll entertain any questions anyone has.
Any questions from the board?
Not really a question, but more of a comment. Just the fact that all three, governor, House, and Senate are pushing for, both the attendance piece and then that last piece that you went over as well. It just seems like they want things to get back to normal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good sign in that respect, but we'll see.
I think so too. It's going to be interesting to see, but there's definitely a push to get back to, I think there's a recognition that the best way for most students to learn is to be in school.
Sure.
So it's good to see that reflected. Absolutely.
Chris, is there an opportunity for us to ask questions to them? I guess if we're held to attendance requirements, if there's still a requirement to quarantine students, it seems like that would be a barrier to us hitting the actual in-person class unless that quarantining is going to be suspended.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of that still has to be hashed out, whether or not the quarantining is still needing to happen. Hopefully it's not. But if it is, I'm sure there will be some type of forgiveness or waiver so that it's not impossible for districts to meet that requirement. Yeah. I mean, much more to come. It seems like it's all pie in the sky at this point. But if you remember last summer, it was June 30. We received all of the, I think Scott and Jen and Matt and all of us still remember that in our nightmares. We received that huge document and had, it was go time to get that all figured out. So hopefully we'll receive more warning this year and hopefully things continue to improve. But I'm hopeful that they'll make it so that it's attainable in one way or another. More to come for sure.
Chris, I have a question regarding the estimating conference. And without getting too deep in the woods, who is attending that? How does that help you make a budget? Or do you get official word from somebody, or just give us a little background of what that looks like?
Yeah, so that takes place right in the state capitol. And that's when they really come together and they discuss it and they go through and they bring in, there's a lot of economists there that speak on, where the tax revenues are, what's changed since the January revenue estimating conference. And it's kind of that I don't want to say last step, but it's the next step for all those three branches of government to come together and say, okay, we feel comfortable. Let's settle our differences and come to a number. And it really typically moves pretty quickly, after that. But basically, yeah, it's the economists, it's all the tax, professionals that are coming in. It's really looking at all the state coffers and saying, okay, this is how much money we have. It's more than we estimated in January. Here's the estimates that are, improving. And this is what I'm hearing. Everything is improving from where they thought they were back in January and what the outlook appears to be for the months and years ahead. And so that's when they really settle. I've heard that it's very possible that the numbers, the per pupil foundation allowance is going to be more than any of those proposals are. So you never really know where it's going to go and how they're going to settle on the different buckets they put the funds into. But it's kind of that last check-in, okay, things look pretty good or things look really bad. In the case of last year, things were looking pretty bleak. And then they come together and work on it because they know that the budget year is upon everybody. So I can send you a link, Mr. Rivard, if you'd like to tune in. It's public and it's actually pretty interesting if you have the time. I usually have it on while I'm working on other things.
Sure, I'd like that. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. We'll move on then to item B, the 2021-22 Kent ISD Operational Budget Resolution. with Chris LaHaye.
All right, I won't spend as much time on this. This is a requirement of all, you guys are familiar with this. Sorry, I'm trying to get my quick little show up here. This is a requirement we have to do each year where we have to adopt just the general fund aspect of the Kent ISD budget. So this is just their proposal and their recommendation. The full budget and language is included in board book, but this is just a brief overview, just a 2-slider. And really the packet includes all their funds. You'll see the career text fund, special education, and others. General considerations, and I looked back at last year, things were looking pretty bad once again because we were really coming to terms with COVID. They are projecting a 3.5 increase in property tax revenue. Really, it's 4.75%, but they've got a Headley reduction, excuse me, and they're projecting a 2% increase in state aid. So really positive from the revenue standpoint, with the exception being investment income. That's something that we've seen, that I've reported to you, where our investment income has really gone poorly. I looked back, and just 2 or 3 years ago, Kent ISD earned over $1 million, over $1.1 million in investment earnings alone, and they're projecting just $100,000 for next year in aggregate. So it's just pretty remarkable how poorly that's really gone down. Expenses, they did a 1% wage increase. There are some other, obviously health insurance and MIPSers, those go up every year. The big one is risk management, our property casualty insurance. We're going to see that as well, just a little forecast there. And that's really based on cybersecurity. And that's across the board with COVID and all the online and everything going on. We're really seeing increases in insurance around cybersecurity and risk management. So something to keep in mind there. Keep in mind, the general fund budget is mostly grants. You can see that there, 34 of their $47 million is all grant money that comes in and flows through. And then the bottom line revenues are projected to exceed expenditures by just over $500,000. And they have a healthy fund balance projected at 11.02. So last year, they projected a fund balance of 7.34. They're in much better shape. This year obviously worked out better for them than they projected. So really no concerns for me. And then this is just my obligatory pitch for Kent ISD. They really do a lot for local districts, as you know. A lot of unifying groups. I go to the Kent School of Business Officials. Scott has things. I won't go through that. Obviously, Jen and Matt, everybody has different things. What really brings the districts together. So healthy fund reserves. So I recommend that the Kent ISD budget is approved by this board. And just on a side note, they still do provide technology services and obviously a lot of special education help for us, early childhood. But we are backing off the business dependency on the Kent ISD as we continue to bring it back in-house. That's my pitch there. So that's all I have for the Kent ISD budget, but there's a lot more in board book for your reading pleasure, or if you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay, it is what it is then. All right, we'll move on then to item C, the food service equipment purchase with combination ovens with
Yeah.
Chris LaHaye.
All right, combination ovens. This is my last one. So this is just a 1-slide presentation. And this one came up relatively quickly on me. As you know, we bought some equipment a few months ago, and we have an excess fund balance in the food service fund. So speaking with Holly and looking at our needs, we had looked at the high school serving line and redoing that. That had a very significant cost of over $100,000. We decided to hold on that, especially after speaking with Triangle and GMB in the bond construction. They said, if you can hold until we get a very concrete plan of what we're doing at the high school, we recommend you do that. And I said, that makes good sense. So we'll hold on that. Another need that we definitely had, according to Holly, is new combination combi ovens, as they're called, at Red Hawk Elementary. So these carry a cost of $60,000 to $70,000. We actually had a bid deadline today. I did a quick 2-week turnaround on this RFP. Doesn't need to be approved by a board today. We can approve it hopefully on May 24th at the special meeting, but just wanted to get this in front of you. And I did ask the questions. Why do we need these? Obviously, how are these going to better serve kids? How are these going to better serve our staff and make their work easier. You know, what we have over there is pretty old, pretty antiquated. These will take a lot of the guesswork out of cooking and make the food crispier and more enjoyable and much more appealing to look at. I understand that we will use these for summer school. We're still going to do a lot of summer feeding this year, as meals are free for all young folks 18 and under. So through the summer school programs, and really anybody that wants to come to the school to get a free lunch can. So Red Hawk currently has 3 old conventional ovens. These will provide the ability to replace those and cook for additional students as we make the new transition and make Red Hawk kind of a, well, not kind of, make it an 8th grade building, have our early childhood centers in there, and it's in the center of the district, so it can really serve other buildings as well. And in fact, it will not just, these will not just replace ovens, but they'll actually replace the stove, which is old there as well. I don't know how that works. I don't know how an oven replaces a stove, but I'm not a food service person at heart, so there you go. These are state of the art.
Any questions from the board? Any wonderings?
And again, that'll be up for action at the May 24th meeting.
Did you say you did get numbers back already or not yet?
We did open them today at about 4 o'clock.
Okay.
I was in the midst of working on a million things and almost forgot about it, actually. We did get 5 bids and we did open them, and I can say that they are all within that estimated price range. So I haven't had a chance to circle back with Holly yet and discuss who we want to go with, but we'll do that this week.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to discussion item D, we have the Cedar Springs Public Schools Extended Learning Plan Report with Jen and Chris.
All right, just as a reminder, this comes out of Public Act 149, which asks us each month to take a look at our attendance rates and consider our return to learn plan as an extended COVID learning plan. And this was something that was required from legislation that came early fall in September. So as we wind out the school year this year, it looks like Chris is sharing that with you.
Sorry, I'm scrolling.
That's okay, I know. All the way down to May. We finished out April since our last meeting, and our attendance is well in the 90% range for most of the levels. And as we head into May, we're in that same general vicinity this first week under our belt so far. Just a note that in public comment prior, the board indicated that there was a concern about the level of service that students who were quarantining were receiving. And we did have guidance related to that as a part of this plan. So that has been shared with principals to remind teachers that there is an expectation that you're connecting with students who are home because of COVID conditions, whether they're in isolation or quarantining. So I did want to make you aware that that communication did go out. And when we have public comment time, if there's anything related to the return to learn plan or the extended COVID learning plan, I will be glad to record that in public comment. And like Chris said, we are not sure what the state of this plan will be for fall. We're still waiting on legislation to direct our next steps with that. And certainly as we move toward fall, we would hope that we would be returning to something that might not require such an extensive plan.
Yep, and for my part, the attendance is in there and updated through the first week of May. So I will be happy when we can seal this thing up and get our last week of numbers in there and report them out to you next month, hopefully. So, but as Jen said, they're still strong typically in the 90s. Some have slipped, and you can see this is the high school RHO has slipped into the 80s. But again, for compliance sake, we need 75% attendance to meet the state guidelines. So we're well within that boundary.
Yep. And it's possible that high school seniors are finished with some of their courses, so may not be attending as regularly because they may have finished all the credits that they need in order to be eligible for graduation.
Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Any questions from the board? we are. Hello.
So the other piece that's in this section that's been added to board book is a copy of our COVID-19 return to learn plan. So if you remember back from August, we presented a return to learn plan that was based on the, at the time, the governor's executive orders. All schools in the state of Michigan were required to have a return to learn plan. The document still contains a great deal of information and relevant information. And so it's still active on the website. But we did include it in this evening, add 2 revisions for your review. So the first is found on page 13. It's just some documentation or some language that speaks to the masking requirements. So it simply states CPS or CSPS will follow all current face covering mandates as required by law, rule, or order. So law would be legislative, a rule would be something that the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services mandates, and then an order might be a public health order that would be passed by a county health department. It goes on to say, in the event that these requirements become recommendations, which is what we're all hoping for, the district will consider the recommendations when making all future decisions. And so a simple 2-sentence add, but it just gives us some flexibility and acknowledgement that in the event that those masking requirements do become recommendations, it then gives us some fluidity to move forward with a plan that is based on recommendations, not requirements. The other change is found on page 59. In page 59, it specifically calls out the quarantine distance for close contact as 6 feet, which is what it was back in August. And I simply changed the 6 to a 3 because that is what the new or the latest Kent County Health Department standard is for all students K-12. That new close contact distance is 3 feet versus 6 feet. And so just those 2 very simple, very subtle changes, but it just helps keep that document more fresh. You know, there are several sections throughout the document that tie back to provisions of the Kent County Health Department toolbox from August, but there are several places throughout the document that it says that, you know, these particular sections will be revised as appropriate as the year progresses and the conditions change, the recommendations from the health department change as well. So this just gives us a little bit more coverage in terms of options in the future. So any questions on that?
I got a question, Scott. For us right now, the mask requirement is currently an order from the which one of those 3 does the current guidance fall under, I guess?
Great question. So the order that we are currently following is an order from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So it's not a law, but it is a rule or an order from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And that is the rule that we're following. So they issued a rule on masks and gatherings. So over the weekend, last week, there was quite a bit of turmoil throughout the state in regard to quarantining. And did local health departments actually have authority to mandate quarantines? And there was a court case up in northern Michigan that illustrated, or that brought to the light of day, that the current Michigan Department of Health and Human Services order or rule said nothing about quarantine. And so therefore there was no quarantine mandate in that existing body of language. And so that's why, as the week progressed and rolled out, that several districts across the state, including ours, indicated that we were not going to be requiring the quarantining because it wasn't something that was required by rule for the health department. And the only way that we would enforce quarantining is if the health department, in fact, passed an order, a local health order. But there was nothing at the state level that required quarantining. And over the weekend, the Kent County Health Department actually did issue an order that came out this morning. But it did, it changed the close contact distance from to 3 feet for all participants in a school setting, which is positive. And they also indicated that they would recommend quarantining for close contacts, but they would not require it. The only required quarantining that the health department's new order highlights is if there's an infection within the family, if there's a COVID-19 infection within the family, and then also if there's a outbreak a situation in a particular classroom, then they would quarantine close contacts within an outbreak. Matt, maybe you can, if I missed a nuance, maybe you could help answer that or fill in some of the blanks on the outbreak versus the past practice of just quarantining all close contacts.
Right. So it had been for just all close contacts within 15 or 6 feet within 15 minutes accumulated time. It's changed to 3 feet for everyone, not just students K or pre-K 8. So it's anyone in the school setting on that. There is a requirement though of close contact or people that live in the same household. So not just family members, but anyone in the same residence would be required to quarantine for 10 days after the isolation period of the infected person. Outbreak is when there's 2 separate cases within the school setting, within that, so let's say for the classroom, we have one student who tests positive and all of their close contacts are notified that they have been exposed, but they're not required to quarantine at that point. And then you have another student who tests positive within the same classroom, and but not one of the close contacts of the other. That constitutes an outbreak with that. And so everyone that's a close contact of both of those individuals would then be required by the public health order to quarantine because of the outbreak. So it's kind of interesting that they have it set up that way, because I would think that an outbreak would be the infected individual and then their close contact ends up becoming positive and so forth. But it's actually stating that they're separate areas within that, say, classroom, in that wing or whatever else on that. I hope that clarifies that. Is that what you were looking for, Scott?
So-
There's mud.
So Trent, you like to fish. So the way the health department explained it on Friday morning in our Zoom call was their quarantining protocol had been more like fishing with a net. So they were casting a broad net, and it was impacting students, a high number of students without any real significant data that supported that it was effectively reducing the transmission of COVID-19. So this new approach is, as they described it, more like fishing with a hook. So they're really trying to be more targeted and really trying to identify those cases. We obviously always hope for 0 cases identified in our classrooms. But this way, at least we do have some wiggle room, and it will definitely reduce the number of students who are being placed on quarantine from the health department. Remember, the district does not quarantine any students. The
Right.
quarantining takes place, the health department does the quarantining.
Right.
Yeah, so our role will be to communicate with individuals who have been identified as close contacts, and then communicate with the health department as well on those close contact students and staff.
Okay. One other question that I have is, and we talked through it last meeting, I know, but I continue to get questions from people about private schools versus Christian schools versus public schools, and I think we covered that really well. So I feel really well equipped to be able to discuss those. But with the new language that we put in there about those 3 criteria for whether it's a law or guidance from the governor or the health department, are you aware of any districts that are public schools that have taken a different stand on that?
I'm not.
Okay.
I know of one Christian school in Ottawa County who, back in the fall, were not requiring face masks of their students, and they were shut down for a period of time until they revised their practice and made that as a requirement. Now, I don't know how much it's enforced, but they're at least complying with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services order as it's written.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
So I'd like to just take a minute and recognize how much work this is for Scott, Matt, Chris, Jen. You guys have just a ton to sort through. And I know this stuff changes weekly, daily. It's just been a crazy mess to really keep up with it. And you guys have done a phenomenal job. So thank you for that. Keeping us up to date on it as well. It's not easy. And I think all of us would agree that we're ready to be done. We're ready to get back to normal, but we're just not quite there yet. And, you know, we have to have a little patience and recognize that we're close. You know, it sounds like things are beginning to maybe change in the fall, hopefully, fingers crossed, but we'll see. You know, we're trying to do our best and we're getting there. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
I have a question, and sorry to get back into the nitty gritty, but of the return to learn plan and requirements specifically about masks during recess for our K-5 students. I know recently, just within the past week, I mean, there's been some loosening of those requirements for athletes and outdoor gatherings, and wondered if how that would impact us in terms of our in particular K-5 students during recess.
So great question. So that's an example of how we could use, as the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services rules change, then we can adapt and adopt our protocols as well. So if the students, as I understand it, if there's less than 100 people gathered in a group and they can maintain physical distance of 6 feet apart from one another, then they don't have to wear a face covering. And so that's something that we could do as well. The hiccup is going to be, can we make sure that our students, grades K-5, stay 6 feet apart? So that will be that's the question for us.
Okay, any other follow-ups? Any other questions?
Since we're talking about masks and, you know, coming up to a future time where, you know, they may no longer be required, has anybody started looking at potential psychological effects of the mask wearing themselves? And I guess, you know, Jen, Scott, I'm noticing it in my own kids, you know, as far as the safety factor. You know, we're instilling that, you know, these masks are worn for your safety. Well, now all of a sudden we're kind of ripping that Band-Aid off, so to speak. Is that something we need to reintroduce slowly? Is it, you know, has any thought or consideration been put on that side of it?
Wow, great question, Matt. Not that I am aware of yet, but I know that social emotional piece is very important. and a critical part of our work as we move forward, but we've not yet, I've not been engaged in any conversations around that unmasking and how we do that well.
Yeah, I would just add, Matt, I think that's a great point. I think we probably need to really talk about that. I think we probably put, and I know as a nation, put more focus on those masks in terms of protection. But when you look at the data, I think there's some data out there that we could share with the kids that would make that transition easier.
Hmm.
Because it's not as, from some of the data that I've seen, it's not as sharp a distance, I guess distance and numbers and data as what you might think. So I think if we could share some of that, if that becomes, you know, widely distributed data that we could share, I think that would give the kids a sense of security to return back to normal.
Yeah, I've seen one visual that they use that, you know, they say this is a human hair and then they relate it to what the virus is. So it would give the kids a visual of, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
And I'm sure, you know, just like our partnership with health experts in the county with Spectrum Health and Metro and the health department, they too will provide resources for us, for districts to use to help ease that transition for their students.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure, you know, all sides are being looked at for this. It's, you know, you got the health side, you got the mental side, and it's a lot. So I appreciate the job that you guys do, but just want to make sure everything's covered. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Everybody clear to move on? Okay, not seeing any nods. Okay, thank you. We will move on to item E, instructional materials for accounting with Jen Haberling.
Great, thank you. So about a year ago, in the midst of the crazy of COVID, we learned that our high school accounting materials were being discontinued. And as a matter of fact, they would not be updating them to be used with modern technology. At that time, we made an arrangement with some other local districts to beg, borrow, and share over the course of the last year while we made a transition to something new. And so Brian Busen, who is teaching the accounting class, has done a review of materials. Unfortunately, we thought a year ago that the publisher that we were working with was just going to be providing us with an updated version, and they decided to discontinue the accounting text altogether. So I'm not sure what's happening in the accounting world. It seems like a very common course. In trying to find something that would be suitable for high schoolers, Century 21 is what was identified. It is a standard high school accounting text, and it uses all of the supports that our current text would use in a more modernized format. So we are planning to purchase that for students to begin using in the fall. And I just wanted to give you the chance to ask any questions that you might have about that.
Accounting's pretty straightforward in my book.
It is a pretty straightforward program, right? It was just a matter of 2 different platforms to choose from. And there were many AP versions, but not just general accounting. It was really quite difficult to even find a general accounting text, which was surprising.
Yeah. We should have had Chris look at it.
You know, when I can get back to accounting, I always say debits and credits don't bring any drama. You know, I don't have to worry about return to learn plans or masks or quarantines. You just go back to a little, it's the best. So I approve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to item F, instructional materials for AP Psychology.
And then in the same vein, you will remember that earlier this year, you approved the new course AP Psychology. As a part of that course, we are planning to purchase the most commonly used AP Psychology text and the one that College Board recommends, which is Myers Psychology. It actually is, the author is from the West Michigan area, from Hope College, so it has a local flair to it as well. But it is it is what every school uses for AP Psychology. So again, we are planning to purchase those materials so that students who are taking that course in the fall will have both the digital and print materials.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to literacy resource for consideration with Jen.
And you will remember that at our last meeting, we had a large group present the science of reading material that we have identified, which is Amplify. And that is an organization that has purchased the Core Knowledge Language Arts program and published it so that schools can use it in a nice kit. I don't have any fanciness tonight because I brought that all last time, but I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have about that resource for next fall for K-5.
I don't have any. I thought the whole presentation was pretty clear.
Thank you, Heidi.
I'm not seeing any other indications for questions either. Okay.
I just wanted to comment that the presentation you did make was just very thorough. You brought in some experts that could help us understand what you were doing and why it was important to make that selection. And I think the selection is pretty easy based on the information provided. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Not seeing any last minute thoughts. So we'll move on to our last discussion item for tonight, the KIASB Board of Directors election. And Scott's got that information for us.
Yeah, so included in board pack are some artifacts for you to review. There's nothing for us that we need to do tonight, but we are required to have discussion. I'm required to present the draft of this resolution to the Board of Education between 5:10 and 5:17. So today at 4 o'clock was the last day that people could submit their name into consideration to be a part of the Kent Intermediate School District Board of Education. And so the next step in the process is for the board to identify individuals from the board who will be the representatives who will actually do the voting at the Kent ISD. 2 years ago, it was discovered that the actual representative did not have to be a member of the Board of Education. And so I was the designee that was elected to go and vote at the Kent ISD election. I'll gladly do that as well again this year. And I will offer up either Mr. LaHaye or Ms. Haverling as my second. So in the event that I cannot attend, they would be able to go and cast your votes at the ISD. But really tonight is just letting you know, giving you the language from the resolution that we'll use as a template, and just letting you know that when we have our special meeting on the 24th, I'll bring forth a slate of candidates for you to consider. And at that time, as a board, you'll need to identify individuals that then your designee will in turn cast the ballot for on June 7th.
And we'll do that at which meeting? Designate you.
So yeah, so you'll designate me and determine your candidates at our meeting on May 24th.
Okay.
At the special meeting.
Okay. Our deadline meeting that's turning into.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's only 2 vacant seats and only 2 candidates running, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
there you go.
Tell you what, Scott, I will attend that. I will give you the night off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I will plan on that. My 7th is open, and I've done it, I think, twice and many years ago. So I can plan on that.
Okay. Well, I can be your second then,
All right. Sounds good.
but we don't have to make that decision until the 24th.
Okay,
So we have 2 weeks.
okay. Any other thoughts regarding that? Anybody want to fight Matt for the spot? Okay, nope, all right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Scott, for being the second. Okay, all right, that brings us to the time of public comment where the board hears from stakeholders or community members, items that they'd like to share. And we do have within our policies that time to speak is 3 minutes. So I will run the timer and give you a little hand signal or politely remind you for the 3-minute mark. And the other thing to note is sometimes it's frustrating for people that we're not going to answer you right tonight, but it's part of the process that we hear people and then we process it and go through the items with Mr. Smith. So don't feel offended, but we do want to hear what is on your minds and hearts. So we will open the floor. Who do we have that might be wanting to speak?
So I did have one individual submit a request to speak on the Google app. Dwayne Gritter has identified himself as someone who would like to speak. And so I can open up Dwayne's mic and give him the floor.
And I will get my timer ready.
Okay. All right, Dwayne, you can turn on your mic and the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Folks, I've never met any of you, and I'm a citizen of the Cedar Springs community. So I just have a couple comments I'd like to make. We've been going around the state looking at different boards and trying to find out if we have legitimate boards that we're working with. So my comment is going to be this. First of all, my name is Dwayne Gritter. I live at 1651 17 Mile Road in Cedar Springs. I'll make the following statements in order to legitimize this and any other future meetings that we may have with you folks. I know this is not a question and answer session, and I know that you are required to answer me next month. And so I'll be looking forward to any response you might have to this statement. All board members serving in any public capacity must have not only sworn an oath to uphold the state and the U.S. Constitution, must also do that. Excuse me a minute. And must do just that, uphold the constitutions. Also, the swearing of these oaths must have been recorded with the proper authorities as prescribed by law. Failure of any of the aforementioned comments by any or all persons acting as members of this board can be and are punishable by law. I would ask that any person not meeting these above requirements remove themselves at this time. So we're finding that many board members on many local public school boards, township boards, and so on, have either not sworn an oath to the Constitution, which they are required to do as a board member, or if they have sworn, it's not been recorded properly. So the citizens, I'm speaking for myself and many others, are asking that before the next month, you guys address this issue. Anybody not sworn, remove yourselves, or find a way to get yourself sworn in and make yourself legitimate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. That was Mr. Gritter. Do we have anyone else in attendance that would like to address the board? You can do so by raising your hand using bottom menu. On Zoom.
I have Michelle Couch.
Okay.
Well, unmute Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Couch. I am a local business professional in Cedar Springs, and I sit on various boards within the community. I thank you for your time tonight. And again, as Mr. Gritter mentioned, I am fully aware that you all are not able to address any of my concerns or comments this evening. I do want to address a few things, and I wish this had This portion of the meeting occurred a little bit later in the agenda because I feel like maybe some of my questions would be covered under the construction update. I do have some concerns about property near the middle school that had been slated, a portion of that to be used by the FFA students for part of their propagation and planting classes. Some time as a resource of local volunteers, past FFA alumni, and local farmers, a lot of time, and also the efforts of fertilizers and other things as far as money is concerned have been placed into a portion of that property. And it's my understanding that maybe there was some confusion with the construction and repaving of some lots in that area. When seeding was supposed to occur, they were not able to. I don't know all of the details behind that because I'm neither on the part of the construction process, and I'm obviously not one of the farmers that's taking care of that cultivating and planting process. My concern is the communication possibly between construction and the ag department, and also for the students who have put the time into planning this process. It's something that they do every spring. It's part of a leadership commitment for those students. And we have a lot of students that have come out of Cedar Springs FFA that have gone into that line of work. And that's critical for them on a resume as they're moving forward in the future. I appreciate your time, all of you, and thank you, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Michelle.
So the next individual is just listed as April, so I don't have any other information. So April, if you can share your name and address and phone number so we can follow up, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So thank you first and foremost for hearing me today. My name is April Patton and I live at 5322 Grosvenor Street in Sand Lake. I have 2 children that currently attend CSPS. And my question for the board is, I kind of want to piggyback off the first person who spoke regarding the oath that you guys took. My question for the board is, what have you guys done to speak out against unmasking these kids? Like, have you politely pushed back with the health department? Did you look up, negative effects of wearing a mask? I mean, there are plenty of universities, such as Stanford University, that has lots and lots of documentation on why wearing a mask is hazardous to people's health. And have you ever thought about making this mask mandate, just an option? I mean, we are American citizens, right? It should be an option. And I just feel like if you guys were to push back a little bit more, we might see some more freedoms for our kids.
Okay, thank you, April.
Okay, and then the only other individual that I can see so far is listed as John. So similarly, John, if you can share with us your name and address and phone number, that way we can follow up with you appropriately.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is John Nix. My son's here in public schools. My address is 13358 Sunset View Drive. And I want to go off of what Dwayne said. Your oath per Article 11, Section 1 requires you to uphold all laws in the state constitution and the United States Constitution. I sent you guys plenty of information, the entire board, regarding the mask, regarding the virus. You have plenty of literature. This was about a month ago. It was my first notice. Today, I sent you guys, the board, my second notice, the right to cure. Your illustration that you guys talk about, I don't know if you can see this. This big circle is a human hair. It's 0.003 of an inch. Your virus is that little dot. It's called the nanometer. It's equivalent. Your masks are equivalent of trying to stop a mosquito through a chain link fence. There's a good visual for your children. With that said, on file, there is 2 state statutes. I'll read the first one. It's 3801-307 Bravo, Section H. The state policy under Section 1307 Alpha shall include a clear statement that all the following practices are prohibited for all school personnel in the public schools of this state under all circumstances, including emergency situations. Interpretation of that law just threw out everything of your guidelines that aren't laws. The laws and the guidelines are for the school district, not the children of the district. Now, MCL 3801-307H, Section Q states restraints that negatively impacts breathing, which means any restraint that inhibits breathing. It's like a filter, guys. It inhibits it. You're in direct violation. Everyone who took the oath, you're in direct violation of your United States Constitution. Therefore, what Dwayne was speaking about, if your oath is not on file, it's called usurpation, which means you cannot hold office as an elected official. It's written in the law. I've sent you guys all this stuff numerous times. With that said, Scott Smith brought up the 6-foot rule. Why can't kids play outside at 3 foot with no mask? I believe our president said 100 people outside gathering maskless. We could go all day. Bottom line, these codes and statutes hold you to, as a public official, holds you to this. This information will get out public. It's going everywhere. Please, board, do the right thing. Step up and represent us. Challenge the state of Michigan, because myself and another lady named Bree are challenging them, and we will win. You're on the wrong side of the fence. Represent we the people. With that said, you have a great night.
Okay, thank you, John. Anyone else that came today and wishes to address the board?
Lindsay has raised her hand.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Apps. I live at 360 Maple Street in Pearson. I have 2 children that attend Cedar Springs Public Schools. I am with John and April and the other gentleman that spoke tonight. I'm asking the board to do the right thing. I understand that COVID's here. I understand that it's real. But my kids' mental health, their physical health, their school alone is important. COVID is not going away. These masks, our freedoms are more important. I have kids that are drowning in school this year. We're in tears almost every night because they've missed so much school for having to quarantine, having to keep masks on. It's just ridiculous. Something has got to be done. You have several parents that are stepping up and begging you to fight back for us. And that's all we're asking you to do, please. It's at the point where I'm thinking about pulling my kids from school, and that's the last thing I want to do. But it's getting to that point, and it's getting to that point with several people. And we want more pushback from the school district on the health department. They're not what gives us our rights in America. We want pushback, and we're asking you to defend your kids at school and fight for us.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Okay, are we seeing any other indicators?
Not seeing any other. Yes, Sarah has raised her hand. And then Sarah put her hand back down.
Okay. We don't want to miss anybody. We've got several people in attendance.
Okay, Sarah is back up.
Okay. Hi, Sarah, are you there? You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
There you are. We
Oh,
can
thank
hear
you.
Yep, if you can give us your contact information.
You actually already have it. I was there in October. My name is Sarah Smith. And you actually replied to me and everything. It was about the mask situation and unmasking our children. Have you guys seen the paper from Sparta? The superintendent, I believe, actually submitted letters and different, I think that Trent might have been thinking about that or asking about that. I can send you that. It is about the fact that their school board or superintendent is fighting back, telling them that they do not agree with it and that we should be able to make our own decisions within the school district. If we can teach our kids, we can obviously figure out whether this is a problem in our school district, which I do not believe it is. When I was looking at the dashboard that tells how many kids we've had and whatnot, we have not had very many, in all honesty. Most of the time it's always been from the quarantine, and that actually was our Kent County and all that has decided that they're not going to allow that anymore, the quarantine, because they couldn't figure out who was actually doing the quarantines. It was either the school or the health department. Nobody was doing it correctly, so that's gone now. I'm very frustrated with the fact that I have not heard any of you guys. The thing I got was a letter from the lawyer. You're not standing up for our kids. We've put you in place to stand up for our children. That's what we asked you to do. That's why we elected you. And I haven't heard anything that you have put anything out there to fight for our kids. That's your job as the school board, is to fight for our kids. Not only is it your job to educate them, but it's our job as parents to determine what's good for them and what's healthy for them. And on another note is the possibility of the vaccine being mandatory. That is my choice, not anybody else's choice, what happens to my children. If that is a mandate, I will pull my child so fast you won't know what happened. And he only has one more year to go. And it's very frustrating with what everybody's trying to do with all this stuff. Sorry, I'm not as straight on because I wasn't going to talk about it today. I didn't write it out and it doesn't come out as well. But you have my email that I sent you all with all that information on it before, and I can send you the one from Sparta. There's other school districts that have done it as well, but Sparta is in our group, I believe. You know what I mean, of what that is. So I just ask that you as a board do what Sparta did. Stand up for our kids. I don't know. That's probably all I have time for. So.
You're at about 20 seconds. So you're close. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Right, thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. Do we have anyone else that would like to address the board? We don't want to miss anybody.
I'm not seeing any new hands.
Okay. Any last minute thoughts? Last call. Going once, going twice. Looking to close public comment if we have no other interest. Okay. All right, we will close the public comment at this time. If there is if anyone that said, oh, I wanted to say this, you can reach out to the board with our emails or to Mr. Smith. We are listening. So thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, we will move on to our action item for tonight, our lone action item. And it is for the 2021-22 Kent ISD operational budget resolution as presented. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
Or
And support.
Any discussion?
So just one question for Chris. What exactly are we approving? You know, I'm assuming this is going to their board for approval, but each district within the KISD just gives our blessing, so to speak.
That's exactly it. Yep, it's really more for informational purposes, but ISDs are required across the state to have each local education agency approve their budget. So,
Okay.
yep, but their board still has to ultimately adopt it.
Thank you for that clarification.
So it's like part of the partnership agreement that they ship
Exactly.
out to all of us. Okay.
Yep.
Any other discussions or clarifications before I call the vote? Okay. Vice President Schaffner,
Yes.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
yes.
President Reed, yes. The motion carries as presented. That brings us to the portion of the meeting for our communication piece with the board. And for our part of it, we have been received various communications from different stakeholders, and those have been shared and sent to all of the board members for your contemplation and review. And there is one though it is the Sparta letter from the Sparta superintendent. I have been in contact with Andy, and he has reached out. And we do know that we've had several persons from the public personally either reach out to me. I know several of you have heard from people, and then we've heard from it in public comment tonight. But it's on our agenda to talk about, I have the authorization and as board president to respond to that, but I'm not comfortable in just writing the letter until I gather your thoughts, so it does clearly reflect the position of the board. So I'm looking for your input, and my proposal is that I'm going to go down, even though we're not at the board table, but I always think of you in those seats. So if I look way down to the end of the table, Misty would get to go first. So in our thinking that responding, if we would like to do a letter like Sparta did, like their board president put out to us, I'd like to hear your thoughts, and then and it also shares, publicly where we're at. So Misty, if you would like to go first. And my thinking is we'll let everybody go through, and then we can have more discussion on it.
Heidi and
yes.
Misty, before you chime in here, Heidi, could you just summarize maybe what that letter says, so we're all kind of talking about the same thing?
Sure. Okay, it's summarizing their position of what they think we can do safely. And it's writing back to the different, to Governor Gretchen, and the different, it was sent to all the schools around, and it also reached out to all the government levels of entities, and stating what they felt was an overreach and what they felt that we as schools could do safely. That's an overview.
In a nutshell, it would clarify our position as a board and what we view our students should do one way or another.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
And they also talked about, how they hope that school could start next year. So, okay.
So how I personally feel is when I read the letter from Sparta, I totally agree with it. I do. I feel that we're elected to do what's best for our district. And so what's good for other districts, maybe in the UP or maybe the southern part of the state or on the east side of the state, may not be the same as what's best for us. But I know, especially with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, the mental health aspect of the quarantining, isolation, and then also the mask mandate. I totally understand the very beginning. I understand that, but now I feel like there is data showing that the quarantining and missing school is just not, it's not conducive. It's not helpful for our kiddos. So I feel that we, as elected officials, that we should do what's right for our district, and that it should be based at a local level. That I really wish that we would be able to make those decisions based for our students and the parents and the community. I wish more families would have spoke out during our board meetings. In the meetings prior, we've had 2 or 3 or 2, and we can't read minds. And so now that people have been speaking more, I mean, we have to do what's best, in our opinion, for the majority of our district. And so I really would hope that more and more families would talk to us, not attack us or our superintendent, but share with us their feelings of what's in the best interest of their family, their kiddos. But I support that letter. I really do. I think that this should be a local decision. I think we should have that right to make that decision for our district. That's just my feeling personally.
Okay, thank you. All right, Jeff, you're up.
Well, I would summarize in much way Misty just did. It's a local decision that we can make. I think that we do need to move forward with some sort of resolution that indicates that we want to make that decision locally. My only concern with it is all the evidence also shows that it is spread where large groups meet, and there's nowhere in Cedar Springs that larger groups meet than at Cedar Springs schools. So we do need to be able to control it locally, but we need to be able to control it locally as well. So I'm on board. If that's what the board chooses to do, I absolutely agree.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, you're up.
I lean toward disagree with things. Much like when I don't know if you can hear me because my Wi-Fi is not good. But much like as board members, we trust the expertise of our superintendents and our teachers and such to give us the best information. I'm very comfortable with allowing the health department as experts as far as health things go. So that's kind of where I'm at. I would rather the health experts make those decisions. And as far as mental health, I have at least one child that lives in my house that if the mask mandate comes down before the health department says it should, she will be very, very uncomfortable at school. So not to say that her mental health is more important, but that the mental health goes both ways. It's not just the students who don't want the masks on whose mental health is affected. It will be other students that their mental health will be affected the other way. So
okay,
take that for what it's worth.
No, that's important to know. So thank you for that, Shannon. Okay, Trent, you're up.
All right. So I know I passed on gratitude, so probably point of order. I would like to, I am personally thankful that we are hearing from these parents and that they're sharing their thoughts. So I'll go back on the agenda, and I'm thankful for that. My personal belief lines up with the parents we heard from tonight. The information that's available about what the masks do and do not prevent, I think is available now when it wasn't before. I am not a fan of government telling you what to do with your health. I am not a fan of forced vaccination. I think parents need to make that decision for themselves. Anybody who is watching these recorded meetings know that I have taken a stand on multiple occasions to say that as soon as we can put the authority back in the hands of our parents to make those medical decisions about masks and other things, we should do so. I've had people ask me their opinions. I've shared openly my opinion, but I don't speak for the board. And I am absolutely in favor of the board taking a position. And I would reference the information that's been shared with us from the public. I think it's good information. And I would also reference page 5 of our Board of Education operating procedures within Cedar Springs. Principle 1, the first bullet says, board members are elected at large to represent the interests of all constituents. In determining policy, board members shall represent the general welfare and individual rights of all citizens. And I take that last part, individual rights of all citizens, very seriously. My kids have been doing the at-home learning because I do not want to put a mask on them. I think it's going to impact their respiratory breathing over long periods of time. I think it does impact psychological well-being based on some studies that have come out. And so as soon as we can unmask the kids and as soon as we can put this behind us, I certainly would be a fan of that. So I am willing to put a motion on the table at any point. I think we absolutely should take a stand as a board and let the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services know where we stand. I understand we can't do it without them changing in guidance, but I certainly think we should lean on them as a board.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Tracy, your turn.
Okay, well, I very much agree and would echo with most of what Trent just shared. I just want to say too, though, Shannon, I really appreciate your point and your openness of sharing even about your own daughter, because even to Matt's point earlier, thinking about the psychological impact of kids who have been wearing masks and then having them feel safe and that just becoming so much of the norm. I wouldn't, in the midst of any of this, want to lose sight of the impact on both sides. So I just want to say that is very important to me too, that no one gets lost in the shuffle. But I've been chomping at the bit for things to go back to no masks. I personally have felt most passionate about the testing of athletes and quarantines, and have sent many texts and emails and supported groups that were fighting against those things. So that is certainly something that I've been very passionate about. But this letter that the Sparta Bird wrote, I would agree with all of it. So I would very much support drafting a similar letter for our district. I do love the idea and would urge that the power is placed at the local level, that it would be a local decision rather than a state or county decision.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Matt, it's your turn.
Thanks, Heidi. You sure you don't want to go first? So, I try to see this from many different sides. And one, I am totally in agreement with trying to, have that local say. But with that, we're under the state government, and I don't want to just take that lightly. And the state is under the federal, there's a chain of command that goes on that I respect. And in my own profession, that's something that I understand pretty well, with not only the building codes, the ordinances that are at a local level, building codes that are at state, and then there's also this international thing that goes on too. So there's these varying degrees that I'm kind of wrestling with. One is, yes, I don't want masks on kids. Let's make that clear on my end. I don't think it's good for the learning environment. I think it's a distraction. I think it's potentially unhealthy. but I am not a medical professional either. So those are all just opinions, personal opinions, and seemingly common sense. But again, it's one of those things that I'm not a medical professional. And I would want to lean on our local medical professionals if we were to go down that avenue. I think this letter in and of itself is just addressing the fact that we do want to take a stance. We want to make sure that, the community knows, that the government knows that, we do disagree with their stance, but at the same time, we want to be respectful and, follow what they're doing or follow what they're saying to do for the moment. If that makes sense, it's one of those catch-22s. Yes, I disagree with you, but I respect your authority and recognize that you guys are still governing the state and us as a district. So that's my thought.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So I appreciate all of your input. For me, Scott's done a lot of work advocating for our numbers, for our students, and being, the voice of, common sense. And, when the athletes went back to play, we were on that letter. And so those hard conversations, have been happening. And, Scott's, been working on that. For me, I am for informed consent on issues. I don't like the medical mandates. I've always, I was raised, for more natural things. And we've had the CDC, doing this one national, public health swipe for, whole countries. Well, is that really what's going on in Michigan, in Kent County, and what's best for our kids? So it's a lot to look at. It's a lot to untangle. And I think the state is trying to untangle itself as the country is untangling and talking about more local control. And and that's what we're hearing, from our stakeholders. Look more at our numbers, look at our kids, and what makes sense for our district. The quarantining I didn't like from day one. I worried about free and appropriate education and removing kids. That's going with Matt's something he said earlier. We are seeing progression. And I think that is coming from the conversations and the letters that people are writing to their legislature and the health department. The health department's hearing from parents, as they should, and as should people's pediatricians. If you're worried, be on those doorsteps too. I'm worried about my kid. So it's all those kinds of pieces. I'm worried about a lot of things. But, in the board position, we're elected to do sometimes not this easy work. And we are working to untangle the pieces for what makes sense for our community. And we're listening, and that's where I'm at on it. So I think I've gathered enough information that we can author a letter that can honor the board as I've heard from you. So I will move forward on that. And even though it's a correspondence, and so I thank you for that information. So did anybody have any parting or afterthoughts? Yes.
We could probably just make it official and saying that we authorize you, Heidi, to compose this letter and send it out. Do you feel comfortable doing that?
I do.
All right. I'll throw the motion on the table. I'll move to have Heidi author a correspondence letter based on our comments per our review that we send out to the public.
Support.
Any discussion?
I have a question about per our review, what does that look like? What does our review look like of it?
I can send you a draft.
Right.
Oh,
But
I'm sorry.
then do we vote on whether or not it goes out, or do we just, that's where I'm confused,
Right.
is what we're voting. It doesn't, to me, make sense to vote on whether or not you can author a letter. It makes more sense to me for us to all see the letter and decide from there whether or not we want it to be sent out. Although it may be a moot point because I'm clearly in the minority on this issue, so.
I guess my original comment of her review would be just to read once, and then, you know, if there's any typos, clerical errors, that sort of thing, not necessarily content, but it could be in that regard. So that's what I meant by review.
Okay, any other thoughts?
Just a procedural question, I guess, Heidi. As the board president, you speak for the board.
I am
So-
the board spokesperson, correct?
Yeah. So do we need to vote to approve the letter that you write, or do you speak on behalf of the board? Just in terms of administrative procedure here, you know?
I've got your input. I believe I can honor all of your thoughts.
I'll chime in. I don't think you have to, Heidi.
Okay.
Being the
That's where I was
spokesperson.
at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just trying to make it nice and making
Right.
sure that everybody's in support of doing this. So,
Yeah. Right.
but yeah, as our spokesperson, we've already voted you to do that.
Well,
So,
and the reason why I brought it was, as I thought, well, sure, you know, I could write a letter, but I wanted to hear from everybody. And this was a good platform, you know, to do that. So that, you know, that was the other piece of it too, to be sure my compass was where I thought it was.
And
I really
just
appreciate that.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you, Heidi, for that.
Yes, thank you. And I think it shows too that we're communicating with each other
Right.
also.
Right.
For the record, from a board minutes standpoint, this will be recorded in communication. I wasn't planning on putting it up into action items.
That's
Because
correct.
of what we've discussed.
Right.
Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
I would agree.
Thanks.
So then do we need to officially table that motion since we're not going to vote on it then? Do we need to rescind that motion, Matt?
the motion is on the table. It's been supported. So yes, technically. If we're not going to vote on it, yes.
Okay.
So somebody moved it.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I guess I would move to table that based on the fact, or rescind it based on the fact that Heidi's the spokesperson for the board.
Support.
Any further discussion?
Can you,
Yep.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
It's just a little delayed, but I can hear you.
I just wanted to get out in the public. I'm not like wanting kids to wear masks forever or anything. My stance is I want kids out of masks as soon as possible. My stance is more that I want to trust the medical professionals to tell me when that time is. I just wanted to clarify my position.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to rescind the motion. Do we need to vote on that?
Those in
Nope.
favor?
Okay. Everybody in favor of rescinding the motion?
Yes.
Say aye.
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 Opposed? You're opposed to rescind it, right? Okay. Or your aye, Shannon, your aye.
Well, I was aye.
Yes, okay, everybody's an aye. It's unanimous. Okay.
It was a delayed reaction.
I don't like, oh. All right, so that's all part of the communication. So good. Thank you for the good dialogue. And you know, whenever, I mean, these are the good spots that we can be in. We can talk about, things and clarify it. And I appreciate that as a board. And I appreciate the public for sharing with us and for the other pieces of correspondence, we've gotten from parents. And I think we all majorly got the little, hey, did you see the Sparta letter, from multiple sources. So that's the discussion. So, all right. So that's my part for Board of Education communication. Scott, Trent, do you have something?
I do. I had somebody ask me about with the bond and all the improvements around the buildings. I know when we had originally talked a long time ago, there was some discussion about a greenhouse that may be going up to support our ag program, which is a very strong, healthy program. But since the bond proposal, I haven't heard anything more about that. And so when I was asked whether or not we were putting a greenhouse up, what size was it and the location, I didn't have the answer to that question. So I just wanted to share. We don't need that information right at this minute, but I just wanted to share that there was some inquiring minds about if we were continuing to move forward to invest in our ag program, which of course I would be in favor of, but just curious if we have any more information. So maybe at our next meeting, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I can answer that question, Trent. First, I appreciate you bringing it to my attention or bringing it to our attention. Everything that was on the bond board is going to be taken care of. So if we promised a greenhouse, we're going to take care of a greenhouse. Right. The high school project is in 2 stages. It's not a part of phase 1. It will be a part of phase 2. The details have not yet been determined, as are many, many facets of a $68 million bond project. So
for sure.
If we had it on the bond board, it will be taken care of.
Okay. And I don't remember if it was on the bond board, Scott. So I'm not.
It was included.
It was okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. If we said it, we're going to do it.
Yep. I believe that 100%. I got utmost confidence in that. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other communication from the board? Everybody good? Shannon, you're on delay. Are you good? All right. Okay. All right. We're closing board communication with each other. And Scott, that puts us to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a quick update. We did break ground at the middle school on Friday. It happened a little quicker than what we thought. We knew that they were bringing in some equipment, but as soon as those as soon as those bids were approved, they had an opening in their schedule and got started. So it did have a negative impact on the field that the FFA students had been working on. That was an unforeseen consequence of that early start. Brett Willett, the FFA teacher, reached out to me via email today, and I responded to him right away. He's not yet followed up with me, but I'll gladly sit down and meet with him. We've got some green space over there. So, if plantable sections of ground are used up by the driveway, then we'll replicate that in another section of the parcel. So I'm confident that we're still going to have space for those students to work. It just, right now their parcel is the shape of a trapezoid, and in the future it will be a more complex field, which is just like every other farmer deals with on a pretty regular basis. So yeah, the space will be replicated and put back. It'll just be maybe a little different shape. The other thing is the air, Univent. The Univents are on campus. They're in our maintenance facility, and so that's the first step in starting the work at Cedar Trails. We do have a triangle construction van or a triangle construction trailer on site. And so we're gearing up and getting started. Any questions or wonders? Chris, do you have anything to pitch in on that?
Oh, you knocked it out. Just saying there's a real quick turnaround time on this. Obviously, that's quite a bit of work to accomplish in a short period of time, especially with school starting earlier than what we're used to. So that's why the haste to get going, to make sure that when students need to get back, teachers need to get back in the buildings August 18th or so, they will be ready to go. So.
May the construction crew have workers and may they be able to get supplies.
And that's why we pre-purchased those HVAC,
All right, there you
those
go.
chillers and those unit vents. But if you remember back in January, so we didn't run into it because I think we'd be in trouble if we had.
Mhm.
So,
I
yep.
do too.
And I'll just chime in with one of the comments that was brought up, communication. You know, obviously with a quicker timetable with things kind of moving as fast as they are, that's one that, you know, we want to pay attention to, making sure that everybody's communicated to. And Scott, sounds like you did a great job with reaching out to the FFA guy, and hopefully that'll work out. So yeah, just staying on top of the communication.
Okay. All right. Was that the last word, Scott? All right. So we'll move on to planning. It does look like we're anticipating a special meeting for May 24th. It will not be a full work session, but there's some deadline material that we need to meet. So it looks like that's going to happen. And that is what we formally have on our calendar. I don't think I'm missing anything. Anybody have any other dates? So we will work towards that, and we'll keep the information, keep anything I get before you and before the whole board, any communications from the community. And with that, at 8:33 Verizon time, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you. And thank you, everybody that's joined us in Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you.